welcome back to Adam's Fam Anime. My name is John, and today we're going to be reviewing the most recent chapter of One Piece. This chapter is number 1018, and the chapter's title is Jinbei versus Who's Who. So, without any further ado, let's start with this week's request page, which I actually like this week. This week's cover page is involving Alti and page 1. Now, page 1 is flipping through a dinosaur picture book while Alti pesters him about playing with her and her plushies. And well, for starters, that page is drawn very well. In addition to that, if you really pay attention to the background, there is some cool details such as the fact that all of the plushies in the cover page are of the high-ranking Beast Pirates. Yet still, another cool detail about this request cover page is that going from top to bottom, the plushies are actually in the ranking order of these Beast Pirates. So at the top of the panel, we see Kaido's dragon plushie, and then moving downward, you got King, Queen, Jack, and then on the ground level, you have the remaining Topiropo, also in their Zoan forms. Anyways, the cover pages have kind of been irking my nerves lately, but I thought I'd address this one in particular because I liked it so much. But moving on to canon material now, we start off the chapter with seeing that Otama has flipped about a total of 300 headliners to the rebellion's cause. And subsequently, we see that most of the Beast Pirates who were there for the announcement have recognized that Tama is responsible for that change and is likely to be more proactive in targeting her from this point forward. Speaking of which, we check back in with Nami, Usopp, and Tama as they are seemingly running for their lives. We get some Beast Pirates chasing after them, and those Beast Pirates rationalize that killing Otama might actually undo her abilities. And given what we know from Devil Fruits, that's a pretty fair assumption. However, they don't get to test out this assumption because Daifugo, the Scorpion Smile user, he manages to wipe out the group chasing our trio with relative ease using a named move called Scorpion Death Needle. And right afterwards, we also get a little bit of comedy where we get to see Daifugo giving a stern face and a thumbs up to Tama, who had just referred to him as Daifugo-kun. Now, we'd already know how Otama's fruit worked with animals, and we'd seen it on display many a times by now. But when we see it used on a human, we get a little more emphasis on exactly how that fruit works. Like with Daifugo and Tama's interaction, it almost seems like they had known each other for a long time, or they had built some kind of rapport where he considers them like longtime friends or something. And then we get a bit more comedy when we see that Lady Speed has picked up Nami and Otama and somehow is just blatantly ignoring Usopp, who's running for his life. But jokes aside, we don't leave off there. We also get to check in with Zeus again. Now, Zeus seems to come out of the climate act on his own, and he asks Nami if he can be her servant again. And she responds by giving him an upgrade to partner. And then upon hearing this, he goes storming down the hall, creating a path for the group that we've been following, claiming that, out of the way, Nami's partner is coming through. It is a comical way to end the panels following this group, but on a more serious note, I guess we can assume that Zeus still has his ability to move on his own. I at first assumed that he operated through Nami's desire and will, so I guess we may need to wait a bit to get the full extent of his abilities, whether or not they've changed or if he's just capable of being in the climate act. But moving on, we go back to the CP0 members who are waiting around in the castle, and they're still playing that Go game to represent the numbers. And it appears that some of the subordinates of the 300 headliners have actually switched sides as well, following their headliners. And so with these new traders included, that makes the new matchup 16,000 versus 9,000 in favor of the Beast Pirates, but with the rebellion gaining some steam. And just to put that figure into perspective, when we started this whole event, the numbers for the Beast Pirates were at 30,000, and now that they're at 16, that means that over time they've lost half of their crew, while the rebellion has already more than doubled their crew. And despite this number game exposition that we get from the CP0 members, we actually learn something a little more important from them during this chapter. And we can start by saying that they don't care who wins between the rebellion and the Beast Pirates. Now, we learned that the CP0 members who are still hanging around during this conflict are actually waiting around to ensure that Who's Who does not make it out alive, regardless if he's on the winning side or the losing side. Now, this transitions us into the meat of the chapter, where we get to watch Who's Who and Jinbei put on an amazing fight. And I guess before we discuss their dialogue for this fight, I can touch base with some things that we see for their abilities. We can see that Who's Who can use the Fang pistol in rapid succession. We also confirm this chapter that he is a user of Geppo as well. Also, this could just be a shading choice, but it would seem that when Who's Who uses the named move Fang Cavalry Flash, it would seem like his fangs are coated in armament hockey. If it is the case, that would be the first time that I can remember seeing someone coat their fangs or their teeth in armament hockey. And speaking of armament, it might be that Jinbei is possibly one of the best, if not the best, armament user among the Straw Hat Pirates. Now, this could be another misleading shading choice from the artist, but I believe that we saw his face coated in armament hockey. Now, that's something we don't see too often in One Piece. I believe only a handful of characters have done it up to this point. And on top of that, we also get to see some new moves, or at the very least, some new variations on some of the many Fishman karate moves that we've seen from Jinbei leading up until this fight. Two of those named moves being the Shark Grip, which I don't believe I've seen up to this point, and also the Gargoyle Tile Fist, which I suppose might change with the official release. And I also forgot to mention about Jinbei's armament hockey, that Who's Who actually was jabbing him with multiple finger pistols, and even though Jinbei was taking it for a while, he seemed to harden up his hockey at some point hard enough to break both of Who's Who's index fingers just before stomping on his tail, so that way he can guarantee landing a Fishman Karate ultimate technique, and that being the previously mentioned Gargoyle Tile Fist. And with that move, the chapter ends, and seemingly the fight also ends as well. However, we're not done discussing this chapter because we really have to address the dialogue in this fight and what it means, or what it can mean, for the past and future narratives of One Piece. So during this fight, we learn from Who's Who that his beef with Luffy is not direct. It's only loosely associated to Shanks. And it seems like that resentment for Luffy is more about him being reminded of his failure by seeing Luffy wear the hat and knowing that Luffy consumed the Gomu Gomu no Mi. However, after that, we learn that while he was imprisoned, Who's Who was mockingly told to pray to someone, or rather a certain someone, who was called the sun god Nika. And the legend behind this character is that slaves in ancient times believed in a legendary warrior that would eventually come and save them. It was said that he would bring laughter to their lips and free them from suffering. And then apparently the guard who told this to Who's Who disappeared shortly after telling him. Now, Who's Who apparently brought this up to Jinbei specifically because of his association with the Sun Pirates, and also because of the Fishman's association with slavery throughout history. And when you see the classic 3 exclamation points in the quotation bubble for Jinbei, it makes it kind of apparent that he may know something about what Who's Who is referring to. Though it is interesting, he should not have expected any answers from Jinbei. He's been a dick throughout this chapter, even going as far as to drop the One Piece equivalent of a racist remark to Jinbei and about Fishman in general. And naturally, with all that information, I am sure that the One Piece community is going to be rife with theories and speculations about this sun god, who also happens to be a warrior. So I think it's a safe bet to say that most of these theories are going to go down routes that touch base with Joy Boy, Luffy, the dawn of the new age, and all of that jazz. There's also been some speculation that it could just be referring to Fisher Tiger, but I don't think that timeline really lines up. And it could just be possible that Fisher Tiger named his group the Sun Pirates because of that myth that he may have also heard, which could have led to him being inspired to release as many slaves as he could himself. Anyways, speculation and theories aside, I think we can go ahead and move on to my ratings for this week's chapter. Okay, so in regards to the artwork of chapter 1018, I'm going to go ahead and give that rating a 9. It was pretty good artwork, especially in regards to the fight between Jinbei and Who's Who. And we also don't get a whole lot of unnecessary panels with the zoomed out and overlooking perspectives. And anytime a fight is well animated, you kind of have to give credit where credit is due. So that's a well-earned 9 in terms of artwork for this week. Now moving on to this chapter's story, I'm going to give that a 10. And the reason for that being is that we get to touch base with some backstory, some myth and legends, and also some speculations and theories. So with Who's Who's backstory and the sun god mythos, that alongside the CP0 revelation of why they're remaining on Wano, there's a lot that we learn in this chapter. And even alongside the fight, everything feels well paced and well thought out. So in terms of story, you're rarely going to see this channel give a 10 for a chapter rating, but this chapter in particular did a really good job balancing the story with the action and giving us a good amount of information without dumping it on us. So that's a 10 well earned, but moving on to the hype, I'm going to go ahead and give that a 9. Now, as I've mentioned before on this channel, that anytime we get a fight that lasts more than a few pages, the hype levels are going to be up there. Also, as mentioned before, the action hype mixed alongside with the story hype and it being so well spaced out throughout the chapter gives us a lot to look forward to and a lot to discuss. Also, I can't fail to mention the fact that anytime we see a Straw Hat win a 1v1 fight, that is very hype in itself. So, combining the action hype with the story hype and getting to see Who's Who and Jinbei really flex and show off their techniques and their abilities, I'd have to say it has been a great chapter. I'd have to say the only reason I didn't give it a 10 is because we really didn't get any of those oh shit moments. I mean, it's the only kind of hype we really didn't get this chapter. So, with those 3 ratings, that gives this week's overall chapter a 9.3 for our rating. And that's because of the great art, the great hype, and the fantastic story. Okay, and now I suppose it's time to go ahead and discuss a couple things from this chapter. The first of which is going to be Who's Who. I'd have to say that it is interesting to see that he's so important to CP0, despite having resources of Wano to bicker about, Kaido and his influence, and not just that, but also the Straw Hat Pirates as well. I think it's fair to assume that Jinbei's not going to kill Who's Who, and also that he hasn't yet revealed all the information that has put him on the world government's most wanted list. It does, however, add to my speculation that Im-sama, the man or woman in control of everything, or at least the world government at the time being, may have been a recipient of immortality via the Abi Abi no Mi. Now, narrowly, this could give us an explanation as to why the world government hunts down specific devil fruits and is more than willing to imprison one of their own for the failure of recovering one of these devil fruits. So if Im was alive back during that great war which set the world government up, it could be possible that much like the giant straw hat that we saw, Im is collecting things that remind him of the past or that were influential in the past, such as important devil fruits, straw hats, and other weapons and memorabilia from both sides of the Great War that established the world government. Just some speculation on my part, but moving on, we can talk about Jinbei. If it wasn't clear already, it should be clear now that Jinbei is among the strongest, physically at least, of the Straw Hat Pirates. Also that his armament haki might be a little bit beyond most of the Straw Hat Pirates, at least in the sense that he can fluctuate it and control it more than we've seen from most other characters. It does kind of remind me of the block mochi that we saw from Katakuri, and I also like how Oda decided to show off Jinbei's character differentials between most of the other Straw Hats, where we get a lot of trash talking or a lot of confident speech from most Straw Hats like Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji. With Jinbei in particular, he stays level-headed and calm even when being racially and verbally assaulted. Now, we may have to see this fight get animated, but to me it seemed like Jinbei wasn't really going all out, but rather just decided to end the fight when he got tired of listening to Who's Who run his mouth. Also, I can't really say for sure if this is just Oda and his editors messing around with us at this point, but I am interested to see if that lightning looking artwork on the last panel of that demon Brickfist could be an indicator that Jinbei is a user of Conqueror's Haki. I wouldn't find it that surprising, since in many cases before we got to Wano, Jinbei was referred to as a captain, a leader, a Shichibukai, and also even boss. That being said, it would be incredibly impressive to know that Luffy has 2 different Conqueror's Haki users under his leadership. And onward to the elephant in the room, the sun god, the warrior Nika. I did a little bit of research into deities and lore. Couldn't find a whole lot in terms of the most common gods that we can think of. The name Nika is similar to Nike, but aside from that, there are no similarities. There's also the god or goddess Libertas of Rome. And there aren't a whole lot of similarities there aside for the general reverence of freedom. However, some of the One Piece community has pointed out that there is a myth or a legend, and I've heard of some people referring it to it being an Indian legend or a legend of India, and also of being a West African legend, and I've also read that it could be a Haitian legend. Now, in regards to that, I'm going to lean more towards the West African legend. I'm not sure if most of you know, but when it comes to the transatlantic slave trade, most of those people or slaves were taken from the west coast of Africa, and they were sent everywhere, all over the world for the most part, but most ended up in the Americas, in particular Northern, Southern America, and the Caribbean islands. Personally, I didn't read up on this whole Haitian Joy Boy thing, but I fully intend to, and maybe we'll do a video in the near future about it. But that's all I have for this video. Thank you guys for tuning into this review of One Piece chapter 1018. Yeah, my apologies for the late video, but I had some setup issues, and with One Piece being on break this week, I figured, what the heck, I can push it back a little bit, and maybe it'll kind of give a quick refresher for you guys before we get this upcoming chapter. Anyways, that's it for this video. I am John from Adam's Fam Anime, and I will catch you guys in the next one.